can pause that. Okay, we'll make a start. So, I don't know, not so many here today. I know that one group are away on a study tour. I don't know, maybe there's two. This presentation is really about how we fit in to the whole design team, because it's a team effort. Getting a building built is a team effort, and understanding that is really important. Sometimes, as you've heard, the architect is at the middle of this team, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes there'll be a project manager who's coordinating the team, but still appreciating and understanding that person's perspective is important. So what we're going to cover is the architect's role and responsibilities, the design team and what they all do, and then we're going to just touch on indemnity insurance, which is miles away for you guys, but it's important you just understand the principle of it, why you need it and what it does. And then finally, just because it fits in sort of to this lecture, I'm going to say something briefly about copyright, which is really important in our world. Because your intellectual property is valuable, and if you give it away or somebody takes it, then all of that hard work, all of that time you spent at university becoming a skillful designer is sort of down the drain. So, but we have a guest with us today, and Phil Waring is a cost consultant from Todd & Ledson. So Todd & Ledson are one of a small number of cost consultants around Liverpool, and they happen to do quite a bit of work for this university. So Alex Beadle, who you heard last week, knows this company well, thinks enough of them to give them continuing work, and so they have credentials. Now, you've had a little tiny bit about how cost estimating works, and in your actual day job, you'll come across cost consultants quite a lot. And have any of you played in an orchestra or played an instrument like a violin or an oboe? And hands up, anybody who's been in an orchestra? Yeah? Any others? Okay, well, those of you who are in that world will know that the viola player is the butt of everybody's jokes in the orchestra. And so it used to be with the quantity surveyor, which was the old term used for cost consultant. They were the butt of everybody's jokes because they were the people who liked to say no, you can't do that. Or they quite often be very close to the client, so that they would be the person who say, do you know why this thing's overspent? It's because this guy has done this, that and the other. Now in the joined up thinking world, the modern world, it's not quite as simple as that. Actually, the cost consultant is very much your friend, because it's them that's going to save you from going over budget, to keep you on the straight and narrow, to avoid you having to spend your own weekend redrawing everything to try and get it back on budget, and save you the embarrassment of the client being very cross with you because the thing's gone over budget. So it's in that spirit, I'm going to invite Phil up to sit in the special chair. And so I've got our usual questions, and of course, if anybody here has got any questions, you're welcome. You're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what I'm interested to know is from Phil's perspective. Okay. So he's the cost consultant, and you're the architect. What is the main job that he has to fulfill, both before you go out to tender, that's to say while the architect is developing their design, but also once the thing's being built on site?
Morning everyone, just to go on with Peter's kind introduction. I was once called the most hated man on a building site. The client thinks I spend too much money and the builder says I don't spend enough. So we're somewhere between the two at the moment. Necessary evil. I've worked with architects for years and years and years. My son's about to marry one, so I'm going to have one in the family soon, which I don't know how I feel about that, I'm honest. But anyway, you have to forgive me this morning. I've not got long to speak on some of the topics that Peter wants to go over. Each of the topics you could spend days and days, so I won't bore you with them. I'm going to refer to my notes quite a bit, purely so I make sure I hit all the things that I think are important, and I don't miss any out. Peter's also got a copy of this, and I'm sure he's...
Yeah, I can upload it. Thank you.
Portal or whatever you want. So, cost consultants, QS, cost manager, all the same things. Basically, we're responsible for the financial management, the contractual management, and the procurement management of building projects, whether they be traditionally procured, design, builds. There's a whole range of different procurement routes you can follow. At that certain stage, we're involved up to our necks usually in most of it. If you break it down between the sort of the pre-contract and the post-contract, probably the first task we have as surveyors in the pre-contract is to meet the clients, meet the architect if he's on board at that stage, and set a realistic budget for what the scheme may be. It's going to be robust. It's not going to be right, but the secret and the skill is getting it there or thereabouts. I and surveyors in general are usually hung by the first number that they give the client, because no matter what changes, sticks another floor on, you make it twice as big. You told me it was £5 million 2 years ago, and you know the score. You can never get away from that. So, in addition to doing the initial budget, you then try and keep on track of all the different facets of the design as it evolves. So you go from what's commonly has been known as a fag packet. So it'll be an architect's typical bubble sketch. I'd like to do this big, this size, blah, 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 and you'll throw some numbers at it. And then as the passage of time and more information comes along and the scheme and the design evolves, you look at it, you check. What I assumed, is that correct? Is there a big problem? Is there a little problem? How do we manage these problems? Because we don't want to tell the architect or the client that they can't do it, but we sometimes say, well, you can have that, or think about doing it in different ways. So it's not just yes and no. There's all sorts of different ways of looking to achieve what you want to do. Contractor procurement. It's not as easy as it used to be. Based on myself, we younger, we used to be able to pick a tender list of the most appropriate contractors we thought were good for that job. So if it was a school, a university, a hospital, whatever, you knew certain contractors had very good experience in those fields, and you could put half a dozen people down. These days, there's things you have to contend with. Lots of clients, especially educational clients like the uni, have frameworks. So the contractor list is predetermined, who you can go to. There is, and I don't know how long this will last, there is the OJU procurement rules that everyone who spends public money has to comply with. I don't know what will happen with Brexit. I'm sure you guys probably know more than me, but that's another thing you need to be aware of. And the actual selection of contractors is difficult. There is all rules and regulations. Well, one of the things that we do is that process, so we'll manage it. After you've got your contractors on board, you then go to the next stage, which is the tender documentation. So you've got all the design, you've got the architectural, the structural engineering, the services, all the different components of the scheme and design team. We coordinate it, collate it, put it all together, and produce some documentation to send out to the market for contractors to price. And again, depending on how you do it and what you send out is dictated by the procurement route you choose, which I'm sure is a different lecture for you. Prices come back. You do the tender analysis. You look at where there's exclusions, clarifications to the tender. We've not done this, we've done this, and this is the reason. And you try and iron out all these little issues that you get back from all the contractors, and basically give the client a level playing field of, well, we've had 5 prices back, there's 1 million, 2 million, 1.5, they're all there or thereabouts. And we go through the process and agree with the designers and the client who's the most appropriate contractor. So that is a very, very abridged version of the pre-construction stage, pre-contract stage. We get to the site and the post-contract stage clicks in. Now, for the QS, there is a number of things that the 2 main ones are usually on a monthly basis you will value the works undertaken by the contractor and issue a valuation or payment certificate or payment notice, depending which contract you're on, telling the client that in our opinion the contractor's completed £100,000 worth of work this month in accordance with the contract, and we do the documentation, which becomes a legal document, goes to the client who then has to honour it and pay the contractor. So it's the cash flow all the time. We value the work, we value any changes, we agree any changes, and make sure the client's paying and the contractor's still got his money in. Because if the contractor doesn't get his money or the appropriate amount of money, it filters down to the subcontractors and everything slows down. That's the problems. The other side of the coin from that is, whilst we're paying the contractor for what he's done, we are and again, it's usually on a monthly basis, issuing a financial statement to the client. So it's a financial, this is the contract sum we started with, this has changed, that's changed, blah, blah, blah. We work it all through. The implications of all these issues or changes is that it's gone up, it's gone down, that's the same. And then, probably for the client, that's the most important thing. He doesn't want to get to the end of the job and go, oh, bloody hell, it's cost me a lot more than I thought. Every month we tell them, we sit down with them, we have a finance meeting. This is this because of this, that's this and this. Which, again, as Peter said previously, the days of it's his fault, Mr. Client, or it's his fault, Mr. Client, they don't come into it. Everyone's in it together now. It is a team approach. I've had jobs in the past, big, considerably, 50, 60 million pound jobs, where the client has insisted that in the finance meeting, which is effectively my meeting, the whole design team are there. Because everyone's in it together. It's not us and them, it's a team.
Okay.
I think that's
great. Thanks, Phil.
Very quick.
So, one of the things I've talked about, and this does actually come up in the exam, is you know these sketch schemes you're producing as you work your design modules here at the university. You know the backstory, you know how the initial sketches work, and then you'll produce something that's halfway to your final submission. Now, in the real world, if it's a primary school and you know you've got £6 million to spend, it's not much use those sketches being 12 million because they're not going to go anywhere. You've got to be there or thereabouts. And so what I'm interested to know from Phil is when you're doing those initial sketches and you're working alongside an architect, and you know, cost consultants do actually respect the skills architects have. They don't think they're all complete idiots, but they know it's important to keep on track or else we're all going to waste a lot of time. So I'm interested to know what techniques you use, Phil, for that cost estimating early days. And I'm also interested to know, you can apply rates to buildings, but then there's all the other things that come in, whether it's in the outlands of Scotland or it's downtown. Okay?
Yeah, okay. And again, I do apologise, this will have to be brief. It's a subject you can go into in great depth. Initial concept drawings, architect's bubble diagrams, or names that are far less charitable. We quite often get a scheme from an architect. I've done some sketches, it's a freehand sketch, it's some sizes, shapes, it's which way up is it sometimes, and you're trying to think, what the hell is he trying to do here? Our estimates can only ever be as good as the information we've got available to calculate them on. So if it's a freehand sketch, the cost and the budget you're going to get is comparable with a freehand sketch. If it's a fully designed BIM model, it's going to be down to the last penny. They're the two extremes, and that's what we can do. We use a lot of current costs. We've got all sorts of projects all over the country where there's live jobs, live costs, which we can draw reference to. But we also have a lot of historic data. There's cost analyses where a project will get broken down into the principal elements, like substructure frame, external walls, all the other bits and pieces, which we can draw on to say, right, we've got a job here. It's similar to something we did previously. The previous one was £1,200 a metre, £2,500 a metre, things like that. There's also a lot of published data. You've probably come across the SPONS price book, which is a publication which is issued, and it's just got it's about that thick, and it's just facts and figures and costs about every element, this, that, and it's a very, very good reference point. And there is a third one we tend to use, which is published by the RICS, which is the Building Cost Information Service, the BCIS, which is an online service where you can put in your parameters and you can do a search for something that's on their system. And there's hundreds of thousands of jobs on their system. And it throw up things that are comparable. So on that, you can, depending on what the information you have, you can say, well, cost per metre, it should be so much a metre. Sometimes we use functional uses. If we're doing a hotel and someone says it's a travel lodge, well, roughly that's £50,000 to £60,000 a bed. You know, it's sad, you just know these things because you do them. A school is so much a square metre because you know the size and the shape, because schools are generally designed to certain set parameters. So there's, as well as cost per metres, there's functional use, and there is a lot of information out there. You just have to be very, very careful and cautious how you use it. You need to understand it. Don't never ever go in a book and say, well, it says for a library it's £2,000, so that's what it is. These databases, it's statistics. Thousands and thousands of different jobs go in, and you get mean, median, mode. And between them, there's a massive range. Could be this, it could be that. What you've always got to do is consider the job I'm doing. Is it comparable with the job I'm making reference to? Is it on the side of a hill? Is it in the city centre where access is going to be an issue? Is it in the middle of nowhere where I'm going to get drainage and services issues? Always look at the abnormal costs. It's fine saying, well, that is that much, but what have you got to add to it? There's no such thing as... I have clients say to me, I do a lot of distribution in my work. Big high-tech sheds, and the clients say, well, I just want a shed of 300,000 square foot. There's no such thing. I work for Iceland. We make sheds 300,000 or 400,000 square foot at minus 26 they operate, and that the same as a shed, say like a B&Q that you're all used to. They're both sheds, but they're poles apart. So always be careful that you're comparing like with like. No matter how good the information is, if you don't spot the obvious, you will have an issue.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to ask Phil, with his super balanced, he's an enlightened person now. His son's marrying an architect, and he loves architects.
Disowning him.
But I'm just wanting to tell us what he thinks architects are good at and where he thinks they fall short. Okay.
Where they're good at? Unfortunately, I'm a surveyor. I've got no artistic talent whatsoever. I'm always amazed and excited to work with architects who have fabulous vision, concept and insight, and they can take a client's brief and go, right, and produce this wonderful design. I just haven't got the skill to do that. So I think one of the main things that the architects are good at, and always amazes me, is taking that blank piece of paper and what the client has got in his head, getting that out of his head. A lot of the time it's still aspirational. He doesn't actually, he thinks he knows what he wants, but he doesn't actually know what he wants. So he's trying to unscramble that as it comes out, reorganise it, and then go with your first concept. Because I would have thought first one or two concept schemes the client will either love or he'll hate, but whichever he does, something will come out of it, and then the job will go on. So from that point of view, I've got nothing but admiration for you guys and what you do. You also have a huge knowledge right across the sector. It's not just the pretty pictures, the architectural concepts. You need to know building regs, planning law, procurement costs, all the other bits, so you have a really rounded overview. Now, we were talking about an architectural practice we both know, and we both know individuals we work with. So before we started here today, one of the guys there, one of the directors, is a concept man. He couldn't tell you how things go together, the nuts and bolts of it, but he'll do you an absolutely fantastic image. He is complemented in his practice by a guy who maybe doesn't have the design flair, but he knows how to translate that into a drawing that can be built, or an idea that can be built. So again, as we were saying before, it's doing that with the team. All the different components of the team need to come together, and you just need to be open and honest with people. Sometimes I think people are afraid to ask questions. So it's probably like being a student, or life in general. Never ever be frightened to ask a question. Because yes, someone may snigger and go, oh, what idiot, or whatever. But for every person that does that, 10 other people in the room will go, I'm glad he asked that, because I didn't have a clue about what he was talking about. And I think architects are good like that. They're quite happy to push things, push boundaries. If they don't know, they'll ask. They'll get some advice. They'll get help, whatever. On the other side of it, and probably again speaking as a biased QS, I think sometimes architects could be a bit more commercially aware, which is very difficult, to be honest, because you're not taught that in college or university. It comes with experience, and some people can be long in the tooth and they'll never grasp the implications of either do that or change that, what the commercial implications are. A simple change may have program changes, which makes the job on site 2 months too long or whatever. There's a cost with that. If a change from masonry to concrete is the cost, it's the cost. I think commercial awareness is something that architects could be a bit more clued up on, but that's not their day job, to be honest. That's what I do, and I try and keep you in check. What else? I'm struggling now. What you do good at it, Peter. And one of the other things which you'll learn, over the coming years is don't just concentrate on what you're doing. Look at the other designers. Look at going back to Laurie, who's going to be the future daughter-in-law. She did her degree in Newcastle. She couldn't get a job to do a work placement a year out. And I got an architect friend in Liverpool to take her on, and she ended up living with us for 18 months. And by God, that was hard. Because to use the technical phrase, she was a pain in the arse. She'd come home, we did this today, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this? Again, she's asking me questions and I'd give her answers. But she'd be doing coursework as well as a work experience year. And she showed me, I was thinking of drawing that, and I'd look at it and think, bloody hell, Laurie, which way up is that? How is an engineer, structural engineer, going to make that stand up? How is a service engineer going to light it, cool it, ventilate it, and all the other bits and pieces? So it's great to have a concept and a vision, but just be aware of how other disciplines within the design team feed into that. You may do a wonderful, slender structure with glass everywhere, but is the structural engineer going to put the column that big in to make it stand up? Is the glass going to have heat implications with the sun, which means the services engineers want a massive duct and fans? Just think about not only what's in front of you, but your peripheral bits and pieces, and trying to integrate it all. There's one rule that you will find, that it's always the M&E installation that cocks everything up.
Yes, I haven't succeeded in getting an M&E guy to come and talk to you, but I will do. Okay, so just before I ask the last question, Phil has reminded me of something. Last year we had a very senior guy from Shepherd Robson, who are one of the biggest practices in Manchester, to come and give one of these little Q&A things. And his big point, and please try and remember this, was sometimes he has people in the office who've come straight from college, and they're so frightened of making a mistake that they sort of do virtually nothing, and they just try and do just what they're told. And his point was that we all make mistakes, and sometimes you have to put your head on the block and you have to have a go at something and then by all means discuss it and be told, well, actually, that's not the way we do things. But just simply to be a sort of retiring violet and wait for someone to tell you is a big mistake. And it causes him a real problem because some students are so frightened of being told they've done something wrong. Okay, so the last question is, internationally, and I read a lot of case studies from all over the place, including North America, the role of the quantity surveyor or cost consultant as we know it in this country, they don't have it, and I'm wondering why that is and where you see things going in the future.
Okay. Well, the world's a big place, and that's an obvious statement, but it is, and certain countries, areas in the world still use cost consultants in the traditional sense. I suspect that a lot of that goes back to countries or areas of the globe that has had close links, either in the past or currently with Britain and the way it was. There was I'm probably getting into territory I shouldn't here, but there was probably countries that think, well, we have a British education, we do this, we do this, we do this, and that to maybe a lesser extent now. I think they still follow that. I've worked in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Anyone with a recognised British or Western degree was set up here by the clients. You know, I've been to meetings with end of summer, the Kuwaiti housing minister. He was an obscenely wealthy guy, and he's got thousands of minions doing this, that, and that. But he always had time for us because we had a classic British UK education. And I think in the countries where architects and surveyors and engineers are still at that sort of level, that pedestal level, I think, rightly or wrongly, some of it does go back to that. The other areas in the world which don't use cost consultants as much, still have them, but I think they, the countries where the architect or the engineer takes a more prevalent role, he's the lead person, and as surveyor I could work under Peter, for instance, rather than us working together. Peter would employ me to look after his architectural side of things. So yes, we're still there, but in various places we're in different, you're at the forefront or you're in the sort of the shadows lurking at the back. What's right, what's wrong, I don't know. Some of the architects and engineers I've worked with abroad are a lot more technically minded. They may be an architect, they may be an engineer, but they both know each other. You know, if I'm an architect, I also know structures, I know rudimentary mechanicals and electrical. So I think their technical knowledge and ability is probably a lot better than maybe an architect here or an engineer here. We're all aware of what each other's do, but in certain parts of the world, one or two individuals can do a lot more, if that makes sense. And then following that through to contracting, around the world, contractors seem to have taken the lead forever in procuring works, and the designers, rather than working for the end user clients, they'll work for the contractor or the constructor. Slightly different in this country, although I think it's becoming more and more so, where contract clients, end user clients, are going to contractors as a one-stop shop, and then the contractors will employ the architect, the surveyor, the engineer, or whatever, as they feel fit for the most appropriate people doing the most appropriate type of work. So as I said earlier before about in the past week, we could select the best group of main contractors or principal contractors for a tender. I think that's the way it's sort of flipped now. The contractors are selecting the most appropriate consultants to work for them to deliver. So it is a subtlety. Is it something we should all be scared of? I wouldn't say scared. I think we should be aware of it. But equally, I think it's people of your age that have got the opportunity to sort of reinvigorate the architectural profession or any profession in construction. I think things tend to come in cycles, and I think we're about to go full circle again. I think architects will become what they were 20 years ago, where there was a phrase which you may be aware of called lead consultant. They were the point that the client went to the architect, and the architect appointed everyone else on behalf of the client. It's not like that now. It's a lot more fragmented, isn't it? But I can see it coming full circle back to that, and this is where you, sort of your age and your where you are in sort of your journey, your education, your working life, you should grasp that. And as Peter said, don't be sat there thinking, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. Push yourself. Every opportunity, grab it with 2 hands. If it doesn't come off, it doesn't come off. Look for the next one. Because the profession and the industry does need shaking up. From my point of view, I think contractors are getting a bit too cocky at the moment. They're getting too big. They're a lot more selective. They'll tender for jobs only if it suits them. As long as if they can negotiate, yes, they're happy to tender. If they're in open competition, not so sure. And it is almost the tail wagging the dog, whereas we need to get it back. And I think the architects are the first person to start that sort of evolution back to where it was.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I'm reluctant to ask you. Well, has anybody got a burning question before we send Phil on his way? He's ending on an interesting point, and I end on that very same point at the end of your 12 lectures, which is in order to reclaim this ground of being respected as the lead consultant, it's very important that you embrace all the points I'm going to cover in these middle 10 lectures. All of this stuff about money, delivery, quality, communications, and the top practices in the country, the really good practices, are getting very good at doing this. They're delivering buildings that actually work. They're asking questions to the client so they deliver buildings that meet their expectations. They do deliver them on time and to the right quality. Then clients trust you with their money. But there was a period 10, 15 years ago when architects were on a low ebb and we're only interested in design and expected to be able to backheel all the other things to other people. And other people are only too happy to take on board all of those things. But to reclaim that middle ground is really, really important. But clients expect a very high standard of service. So thank you very much indeed. You're welcome to stay, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I thought PA sounds quite simple on the issue.
Well, it's up to you, Phil. I know you stayed last time, and I thought you're absolutely hero to do it. But thank you very much indeed.
No,
okay, thank you. Of course, Phil will be putting this down on his continuing professional development chart, which you have to listen to you. Points mean prizes. Okay, so here we go. That's where we are, halfway through almost. Architect's role in the construction industry. So, as I've just said, we have many, many more responsibilities in our role as an architect. And I've seriously considered, you know when you go to a pub quiz and you can put the answers in your phone and then it comes up? I've seriously considered doing the pub quiz version of what does an architect actually do to see how well people are at guessing. For instance, what amount of time of their week or month is spent on design and what amount of time is spent on other things. Anyway, here's all the big list of stuff that you do. You've heard about some of these. You've heard about the importance of balancing programming costs. You've heard a bit about trying to get things through planning, but you get a special lecture on that shortly. Building regs is really important, and you all know what happened at Grenfell, and there's a steward's inquiry going on now as to what people didn't do right. The coordinating the input from the design team is a very, very important role. And even if you aren't notionally the lead consultant and you're working for a contractor, they still expect you to coordinate everything because there is no one else who can do that. Trust me, no one else is good at doing that. And as I said to you before, you become good at that really quite quick because that's what you've been learning to do. Think three-dimensionally and imagine how everything joins together. The administering the building contract we will come on to, but it's a major responsibility unless, and in some cases, Phil would do that on behalf of the architect. Sometimes the client chooses to use a different person to administer the building contract, but very often it's the architect, and certainly on smaller jobs, it's the architect. Health and safety will be our last lecture, and although it sounds boring, it certainly is important, and when things go wrong, they go very, very badly wrong. One of my wife's cousins works for a piling contractor, and he has a responsibility for health and safety. And when he's giving his health and safety lecture, he's able to show them a video of someone being crushed by an earth-moving vehicle because they hadn't thought about the movement of site staff and the movement of vehicles, and this guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They won't release that video because obviously it's very bad PR for their company. But my goodness, it wakes everybody up that these things are really, really serious. And it is part of our role to think ahead, to think of things that influence health and safety. And finally, sustainability. Me and Emma are always harping on about eco-warriors, saving the planet, and where it's going to go in 20 years. It's the biggest single challenge facing us, but particularly you lot, because in 20 years' time, you'll be at the peak of your careers, and this is when all the problems are going to occur. So it's something which is very serious. So there's our little team, our structural engineer. You know, you've met people like that, you're fine with that. You haven't met that many services engineers. You've met Steve Finnegan's team, but they're sort of very much academic versions of service engineers. You met Phil today, so you've got a bit of a feel for what, although Phil is very much a joined up thinking cost consultant, there are guys out there who are not quite so thoughtful.